Welcome to our second panel discussion this morning. I gave you a little bit of a tease yesterday of what the topic was going to be, to focus on analyzing the financial benefits of technology. All right, so I'm going to transition and go sit down with our panelists here, and we'll do introductions of this wonderful group that we've got. Now you'll notice we've got 5 people up here, and you see 4 people at the table. Josh, who's one of our panelists, is joining remotely. I pre-recorded his interview, and we'll have him introduce himself here in just a minute. But we'll start off today. Mike, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your company.
Sure. Hey, so good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Branham. I'm with Point Central, Director of Multifamily Sales. Been in multifamily prop tech for almost 20 years, so it's been a wild ride and a fun journey. But really happy to be here this morning with these fine panelists, and looking forward to our conversation.
Next up is Josh. So Josh, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company?
Yeah, I'm Josh Orosky. I've been in the multifamily industry for, well over 20 years. I've spent most of the time working for owner-operators, and but I have spent a few years also on the implementation side. So as an installer, as a smart home installation, worked for that type of company. And yeah, I've had a lot of experience with technology and just been doing this for a long time, and I've kind of seen everything that's come through. So Mission Rock is we are an operator. We don't own, we're a third party operator, and we operate about 150 properties across the United States. Geographically it's dispersed, roughly about 50,000 units. Oh, I'm sorry, there's about 30,000 units that we're currently under management. And, typically most of our stuff is based in Colorado, but we've got some stuff in California and expanding on the East Coast.
Marshall, can you introduce yourself and your company, in
Yes.
case anyone hasn't heard of them?
Yes. My name is Marshall Friday. I am the Director of Sales for our multifamily division at ADT. I'm the rookie on stage. I've been in multifamily for about 3.5 years. But ADT has been in the multifamily space since 1985, so a lot of history with a lot of folks out there, and we make apartments smart.
Terrific. And last but not least, Taylor.
So I'm Taylor Whitaker. I am the CEO and founder of Innovative NOI. Been in multifamily now for about 8 years. Prior to founding this company, I was the head of innovation at Alliance Residential Company prior to their Greystar acquisition, and after I was the director of innovation services at BH Management. So have a lot of experience in kind of being in that decision maker seat at some of the largest owner operators in this industry. So Innovative NOI, we are a third-party data company that kind of exists in the middle between vendors and owner operators, and we are able to provide owners, our clients, i.e., with really valuable data and insight into the quantifiable benefits of PropTech. So we work with about 70,000 units total now across our client base, and we're actively involved in helping them make their PropTech and innovation decisions.
Fantastic. So that was a great teaser for what we're going to talk about today. This entire conference is about introducing technology into the building industry, and one of the hurdles that all companies face is how do we justify what usually requires some level of investment into technology in order to justify the benefits that we're going to receive, either in terms of increased revenue or decreased costs. So as we talk about that today with this panel, we're going to look at a framework that will help us analyze this. So we have 4 quadrants of consideration as we're deciding whether or not to make tech investments. The first is resident experience. The second is building operations. Third is platform compatibility. And then last is the financial analysis and performance. And we're going to use this as our talking points today as we'll work our way around to the 4 different quadrants. And the way that we'll do this is we'll start off by asking Josh, an owner-operator, to share experiences that he's had at their company in each of these areas. And then based on what he shares, the rest of us here will talk about our thoughts and insights that we have with respect to each of those areas. So let's jump in. So first question is going to be to Josh as we dive into the resident experience. So Josh, how has resident experience influenced your decisions at your company?
The resident experience is always important, when you're looking at any type of technology that you're going to put in place, because these are the people that are actually using the technology that you're putting in. They need to be able to use it. It's got to be simple. It's got to be easy to understand. And it's also got to make their lives easier, when they're on their day-to-day living, just when they're trying to just live. So it's important that they have something that's simple, something that's straightforward, and that doesn't require a lot of technology or understanding of technology to use. Yeah, so smart home technology is always important, I think, to residents. It's becoming more prevalent in the industry, especially on with COVID that came through. It was really important to have self-guided tours because we didn't have site staff on site. It allowed our residents to go and actually tour the property without somebody walking the property with them. So I think that was a huge advantage. That's something that definitely came up during the COVID timeframe. And I think it's just propagated more now that that you can see how easy it is for residents to come at their time and tour property and find out if they want to live with you.
Okay, so resident experience. How can this be difficult sometimes when you're trying to quantify, well, if the residents want it, how do you translate that into a decision?
Yeah, I'm just kind of curious, in terms of smart home, how many of the folks in here have put some kind of smart devices into your own homes? Okay, it's about 90% of you. So how many of you had kind of quantify your experience as easy to use or simple? Has it been, again, show of hands, is it pretty easy to use the smart home? Okay, a decent chunk of that 90%, easy to use the smart home. When it comes to resident experience, one of the things that we found, there's a lot of great amenities that go into multifamily today, from dog parks to fitness centers to any kind of amenity you can imagine. Those are typically used by a small percentage of the residents, a small percentage of the time. When it comes to smart home, it's something that residents are using on average 11 times a day, whether it's unlocking their door, locking their door for themselves to let someone else in while they're not there, if it's changing the thermostats. I jokingly tell people all the time, I don't even know where the thermostats are in my house because I don't touch them. I just change it from my phone. If I'm watching TV, if I'm laying down in bed and I feel warm, I just change it on my phone. So I don't even need a thermostat anymore other than to register the temperature so I know what it's changing to. So when it comes to resident experience, all of you have implemented maybe a DIY experience. Maybe you've put your own smart technology into your home. Maybe you had a professional installation of smart technology. But it is super easy to use. It does make your life easier, and your residents are going to have that same experience. This is something that they'll be forced to use by putting it in, and it eliminates the need for some of the operational stuff, which we'll get into in a bit. But for me, resident experience is super important. All of the smart technology companies out there are doing their best to make these apps smoother, more intuitive, learn schedules, and really create a smart home experience rather than having disparate smart devices in your house that you have to open 6 apps to go through, and I'm going to change my temperature with this one, I'm going to unlock my door with this one, I'm going to turn my lights on with this one, bringing it all into one ecosystem so that resident experience is flawless.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd piggyback on what Marshall's saying, is that with frequency being 10, 11, 12 times a day, this isn't the app that is a new thing, right? Residents are actually, we're all interacting with our locks, our thermostats, our lights on a daily basis. Now we have this mechanism to make that very easy and possibly even remote, right? Just give you that peace of mind or that reassurance that, did I lock the door when I went to the airport? Did I do that? Oh, I didn't. Boom, it's done. So, just with the show of hands that we saw at the beginning, we're already utilizing smart devices today. So the residents are bringing these devices in some form or fashion into the apartment. So that demand is already there. We're way past go on demand, right? It's just how do we utilize it to ensure it's a simple, streamlined experience? Like we say it a lot, if it's not simple, then it's not smart, right? So, by introducing technology that helps them utilize what they're already using today, but in more of convenient fashion, that might even save on costs, might reduce, reduce cost on electricity, improve peace of mind, satisfaction. Like, why not?
Absolutely.
removing the friction from the experience to make it simple can't be understated how important that is to customers. I had experience yesterday outside of housing. Before I left on Monday, I had a prescription that I needed to be refilled, and I called my doctor Monday morning and said, hey, can I get this sent over to the pharmacy because I'm flying out tonight and I'd really like to pick it up beforehand. And it didn't happen. And so then at the end of the day, as I'm heading to the airport, I said, well, can you send it to a pharmacy here in Phoenix? And I looked up online, found a CVS 2 blocks away, and gave them the address. And I was kind of dreading what the experience was going to be like to try to get my prescription from a CVS. I don't use CVS at home. And when I was trying to decide in the morning whether or not they had received it, because I had received confirmation the pharmacy had sent it, okay, I'm gonna have to call CVS, and how long is it gonna take for me to get someone on the phone? And so I called the CVS number, and after like the first 10-second introduction, it's like, we see there are 2 prescriptions for you waiting here. And I was like, what the heck? So they recognized my phone number, tied it into the location, were able to say, we've received the prescriptions, and then the very next thing was, they're not ready yet, would you like us to text you when they're ready? And I was like, yes. And it's like, I hung up and I'm like, do I need to switch to CVS at home? Like that was just frictionless. Yeah. And they knew exactly what I needed and obviously invested in technology to be able to make that happen. So I think really understanding how the resident experience can resonate can result in people switching to your property. It can result in them wanting to be willing to spend more. Okay, moving to our next quadrant, building operations. We'll throw it to Josh again. So Josh, how has improving your building operations influenced your decision to adopt technology?
So I think building operations is probably the most important, quadrant that really comes down to when people are determining what they want to use. It's when you can operate your buildings more efficiently. There's a huge advantage to that, and I really think that that's what's driving most of the industry right now. So I know in our case, we acquired a California portfolio of there's about 50 buildings, but they're all small. There's probably 15 to 20 units in each one of these things, and we needed something that we could manage without we don't have a lot of people on site. So it definitely allows us to operate those properties on a more dispersed area with less people. And when you get those operational efficiencies, that's vital to anything that you're doing, whether it's smart home or any other type of technology that you're putting in place. So, that's where we really see the advantage inside of Mission Rock is through operational efficiency for sure.
This is like the low-hanging fruit. This is the ones that make it easy to adopt technology when you can say, hey, I know exactly and can quantify the efficiencies we're supposed to get from this. Other thoughts on how you've seen this take place with either your clients?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So couldn't agree more with Josh's assessment, really, that it is the most important component, and I will definitely resonate that. Both Alliance and BH, they base their decisions based off operational impact. 100,000 unit portfolios definitely can see the benefit at scale of some of these technologies. So I think you look at electricity cost reduction, the water damage reduction, mold damage reduction, HVAC maintenance expenses, all these things are kind of sunk costs you guys are already planning on spending. So you've got this bucket of money, and essentially you're going to spend it whether or not you want to. So the question is do you want to offset those expenditures leveraging technology, or do you want to continue to increase those expenditures? And with the technology that exists, it really, especially post-pandemic, has been more apparent than ever that being able to manage these things remote is probably one of the most powerful benefits. But in addition to that, being able to lower the money you're putting in that bucket for mishaps or accidents or whatever the case may be, it really does change the owner-operator's perspective in being proactive in their technology adoption approach as opposed to reactive, trying to just solve problems as they're happening. So definitely agree with Josh on that for sure.
I'd even pick up on that proactive, reactive discussion point and go even a step further by saying, can we make it even preventative, right? Absolutely. So, when we sit with property managers, leasing professionals, maintenance professionals, and we start to examine some of the things they're doing on a day-to-day basis and saying, well, what if the technology did this? Because let's be honest, like you start with technology, even that word sometimes on site is like, uh-oh. And we have to take the uh-ohs to make things seamless. And when it's Hey, if you were to get a notification when there's an event, a water event, we'll call it, because that's usually the most disastrous and costly, right? And we can solve for that by getting you out there, getting you in the door before there's a big problem and an expensive problem. Now you save that maintenance professional. Okay, I've got to get on with shop vac, and I've got to get underneath the carpet, and all the things that come with that. I won't go into the A through Z on that one, but it's a nightmare, and it's an expensive one. So then you start to see maintenance say, because usually it's, what are you putting on my walls? I don't know about that thermostat. I need to know everything, So, you start to do that and say, wow, that makes my life a lot easier. The property staff starts thinking, wow, so we don't have to deal with that again. I don't have somebody screaming at me because, maybe the thermostat was left on upstairs and pipes blew and we had this mess. So, when we start to paint the picture, like the actual day-to-day application of this technology, that it's not something that we should fear. That wave shouldn't be big and come crashing down on someone's day-to-day. It actually makes their lives a lot easier. And asset owners say, oh my gosh, like if we can help our staff do that with technology that my residents want and that's good for my building and it makes lives easy for my staff, again, I'd end with like, why not? This is becoming a no-brainer.
Yeah, the thing that I'll add to that is all of the clients that we've talked to, whether they're existing ADT multifamily clients, whether they're competitors' clients, anyone who's adopted the technology already, none of them are saying, we tried it at a couple of properties and we're going to go backwards. We're not going to use technology at any other properties. It's once you've started going down that hill, the speed picks up. You say, let's add more properties. I think Josh is going to talk about that in a bit as well. But when you're adding technology, I think the whole market penetration right now might be 5%. The folks that we talk to may be unhappy with their provider. They may be unhappy with part of the experience, but from a building operations standpoint, none of them deny that it makes financial sense for them to continue down the smart technology path. So whether the service is there that they're looking for, whether the cost is more than they expected, whether the headaches are there just from an actual service standpoint, the technology itself is saving money, it is mitigating risk, and it is preventative. And so that's the plus side on the building operations piece, I would say.
One of the things that Josh mentioned there was being able to be more efficient with headcount. When you have properties that are maybe in the same region, they're within driving distance of each other, but you don't necessarily have to have manpower at each of those. And when I talked to him and kind of went a little bit further into that discussion, it was not just maintenance people, but it was also leasing people that they were able to kind of spread out. That seems to be able to unlock particular strategies when it comes to acquiring, building, that where before some of the finances may have made it difficult or maybe not as easy on paper to justify adding some density within a particular region, that now with technology you're able to do that and have fewer headcount but still be able to adequately service and maintain and sell into additional properties.
Yep.
All right, next quadrant, platform compatibility. We'll have Josh kick it off again for us. So Josh, can you tell us a bit about how either support of a platform or lack of platform compatibility has driven your technology decisions over recent years?
Well, I think any organization, that's whether it's Mission Rock or anybody else that's our permanent manager, you're going to want a technology that integrates with some of these larger players, the Yardys and the Real Pages and every other Entradas that are out there. Like whatever property management system you're using, these programs all have to integrate with them. And I think the industry understands that. That's what you see is everybody's they do work and at least communicate with those applications. So everything is in one, it's in one dashboard, because you want to have 15 dashboards to manage everything. You want to have one place that you go to and you can manage your property, whether you need to reset a lock code or you need to pay rent or anything like that, or get a maintenance request in. You want it all done through one system. And so, obviously the integration with those major property management systems is vital for any of the any system that we look at that we want to implement.
So that seems to be a recurring theme over the last few years, as we have different technology being introduced into different aspects of the customer experience, of figuring out how do they interact with each other. What are some things you've observed or ways that you've seen your clients make decisions based on the support or lack of platform compatibility?
I'll start. So I think definitely it's not quite as important as operational efficiencies that we previously discussed, but it is, I would say, high on the list for sure. Because really after identifying, okay, we want IoT-based technology, now it's a matter of, okay, well, are we going to use a platform that's going to require an extra step for our on-site team, like we've discussed. So I think good technology, as I understand it, you never recognize is actually there. And the only way to make sure that you don't recognize that technology's there is to make sure that all of your technology plays well together. And I think actually your example of CVS is a prime example in how they've integrated their calling system with several other aspects of their business, where they're able to consolidate a seamless experience very simply. You don't even realize, like you said, right? Like, oh man, should I switch? You know what I mean? Like, this is insane. That is platform compatibility. That is, they chose solutions that talk to one another so they can provide the maximum benefit to their clients. And so really all we're doing is the same thing in multifamily and trying to reduce the amount of apps, trying to get everything within one experience that's unified for that resident. Because the retention of keeping a resident, if you're having them open more than 2 apps after having lived there for a year, the chances of them renewing decrease exponentially. And now that we have a data set that we can see how big of an impact that makes, it's more important than ever to make sure that you're finding solutions that are already going to play well in your ecosystem instead of adding an additional layer of complexity that is going to drive you insane. So that's pretty much all I have to say about it.
Yeah, excuse me, I'll follow up on that real quick. It's kind of interesting. I think Josh mentioned Yardi, RealPage, and Trada. Obviously, there are big PMSs that we try and integrate with, but I think all of you probably have a separate app, maybe a CRM tool that you're using, maybe a bill pay tool that you're using. If you're not using one of the big PMSs, and the big PMSs don't do every company that they've purchased to make this one app experience, right? They're out there just gobbling up everybody. They didn't necessarily buy the company that does it best or the company that focuses specifically on what this property management company wants to focus on. So this is just a cautionary tale, right? Each of you has a specific software that you want integrated with Smart Home. And just in this room, if there are 60 of you telling ADT, hey, can you integrate with this software? It's not as easy as just, yeah, we can integrate with it, right? There's a lot of work that goes on in the background. We have engineers that we pay year-round to do this kind of stuff. The man hours that go into it are insane. We hire offshore teams. We hire additional teams to try and build this out for us. So when you say we have this one off-brand thing that really works well for our company, but we want a one-app experience, it's not as simple as just making it work with that one. And I'm throwing this out there just to be on the opposite side of the coin here from a supplier standpoint and say, we want compatibility as well. We want a smooth runway to a sale, but when there are, to the buyer, it's, if you can just integrate this one thing, we got a deal. And they say, we have 5,000 units that will do it in. And then somebody else says, if you can do it in this one thing, you got a deal. And we have 6,000 units that you can do it in. And somebody else says, we have this thing, we have 20,000 units. We have to prioritize that as well. So as much as we want the resident experience to be very smooth, very simple, again, not welcome to your new apartment. We don't have keys. We don't have to hand you a key. But if you could go to the App Store and download these 12 apps, you'll really enjoy living here. That's not the experience that we're trying to create.
Right.
Here. So, to the point of platform compatibility, all of us are compatible with the big software companies. It's the niche or smaller companies that you say, this would really make the resident experience better. As a sales guy, I think it is that simple, but then I talk to my engineering team and they say, why do you keep telling people it's simple to do this? I don't know. I think you're just bang away on a computer for a couple minutes and it works, right?
Just create a button.
So I would add to that. I agree with everything that's been said up here. If we look at IoT as a whole, what's happening at a really fast pace is the opportunity for IoT, right? So I think 5-6 years ago, it was the smart unit, right? It was everything behind the door. And then COVID was a bit of an accelerator on self-guided tours. And so we had to, as providers, we had to figure out the intercom. And then it was, well, why wouldn't I just include my access control with my intercom, with my behind the door smart unit? So we went from smart units to smart apartments to smart communities, and now we're talking about smarter portfolios, right? So within all of that, in that discovery process is, well, what systems are you using for access control and intercom and this and this and this, right? So, as providers, ADT, Point Central, and we're powered by alarm.com, so there's 10 alarm.com engineers back there. So if I say anything, they'll tackle me on stage that's outside of what I should say. But the reality is, how do we streamline that to ensure there's table stakes? So, your home-based software, whether that's Yardi or RealPage, that has to be integrated to move units in and out, in an automated fashion. But to do this on a single layer, one pane of glass, so the resident doesn't feel that there's different types of technology sort of interruptions, right? And the staff doesn't feel that. That's how it's done. And so that's, we partner with ADT, and there's others, obviously, that do this. But that's why we would say, look at your provider to make sure that track record of stability and success is there, because if this gets flawed or interrupted, or if a big uh-oh happens and the provider doesn't know how to solve for that, you've got a problem. You've got a big one, actually, right? So there's that sort of check mark for stability as you evaluate, who to do this with.
I think the interesting thing that Mike just brought up there, if you talk about stability, the companies that you're dealing with, et cetera, this panel, I think, is interesting because 3 years ago, you could have had Latch, Zego, and Vivint up here on stage, and now none of those three companies do smart apartments. Well, Latch still does it today, but it's not looking good. So when you think about that, though, they've had 30% layoffs 3 times this year.
Oh, you're not wrong.
So,
oh, man. Oh.
So it's the stability of who you're working with is such an important piece of this as well. It's not who can get me the integrations I'm looking for the fastest. It's who's going to be the partner that I can trust long term. Absolutely. Because as this market changes, there are new competitors entering every day. There are folks who have been in the industry for a long time selling a different product that now think, hey, we should sell smart apartments. And when you watch as people dip their toe into this, you have to think, okay, how long are you planning on doing this? When Vivint pulled the rug on multifamily, still a great company, still a huge company, multi-billion-dollar company, but multifamily just wasn't a play that worked for their business model. And when they pulled that, it left a lot of customers wondering, what do we do now? I thought we chose a company that was going to be stable, that was going to be here for the long haul. And so dig into whoever you're working with, not just for platform compatibility, but for stability. I think that was a great point, Mike.
Absolutely. How does a potential client make that decision? How do they judge or assess the stability of a company for that type of, if they're a new entrant?
Taylor's been on the decision-making side of this. I think he's probably best to answer that.
That's a great question. So not to totally flog my company right now, but I will tell you that while I was at Alliance and BH, one of the first things that I did as kind of the decision maker over those technologies was I built a kind of an inflow system of how vendors should do business with us and how they should contact us. So that streamlined kind of our communication channel with vendors, which allowed us to assess and verify a significant amount of the benefits and details behind the scenes of a company, such as how are they funded, are they fundraising, what are their goals in the next 5 years, if they're acquired, what's going to happen, all these things. And so why I say flogging innovative NOI is really because we actually only do business with vendors that have passed our verification process. So we put every vendor, for our clients' sake, through a similar process to that I built for those two companies. So we make sure that the companies are going to be around. We know exactly what they're going to do in the future, and we know what their roadmaps are. So we know if the client says, hey, right now we're only going to deploy 5 communities, but we see our 10,000 unit portfolio being 100% smart in the next 10 years. Well, then obviously they want a solution that's going to be around for 10 years. And having been doing this since smart home was really introduced in this industry in 2016, around that time, I can tell you that I've seen more companies come in and out of business in this niche than, anything in my entire experience. So it's definitely something you need to be concerned about. It's something you need to take into consideration when you're choosing a vendor, but more so as well, making sure that you're not going to be getting the call in 3 years because you deployed a latch lock that's no longer supported by a company that went out of business, I mean, obviously you don't want that headache, and I don't want you to have that headache. So we try to reduce that.
And going back to platform compatibility, what advice do you give for a potential client who is looking to adopt a technology? The vendor is saying, oh yes, we are compatible with whatever your system is. How do you verify that? How do you make sure that it's the right level of compatibility rather than signing the contract and finding out months into the deployment that there's some gaps?
Absolutely. So the first thing we do is start with the client and their needs. So we understand way before we even have a discussion with any vendors, what exactly are their needs? What does their ecosystem look like? What are the challenges that they're facing and trying to solve with this technology? Because it's not one size fits all when it comes to IoT providers. And if you're not trying to solve a problem that, say, a more expensive vendor would allow you to solve, then why would you go towards that vendor? So it's my job to really make sure that our clients are maximizing their return by minimizing the investment that they have to make in technologies that actually are going to solve their problems, instead of just spending because it's a shiny new toy and they think they need to spend the money.
Gotcha. Any other advice on what you do to help people feel confident that integration is either going to be there or to?
We have no problem opening, our contact book of people so they say, hey, I want to make sure this integration really works with Yardi. I'll give them a customer who's a Yardi user and say,
they can go see it,
talk to this user, find out how it's working for them, see what the integration feels like, and then we're constantly pulling feedback from folks. We do work with Point Central, and there are calls with customers who say, I need the software to work this way. And again, everything gets prioritized, right? Where we say, okay, what impact is this going to make on the bottom line if we make this change? But the product is constantly evolving to meet customers' needs, customer demands. As new items surface, hey, we want our smart homes to operate this way, to work this way, to be this resident experience now. We continually look at it, but for anybody out there who's considering this and you say, hey, I need it to work this way, ask for a customer that's already using it that way and talk to them.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, moving to our last quadrant, financial analysis and performance. So Josh, can you describe an example that you've had in recent years where prior to making a decision on technology adoption, you had to go through and show financially why it was justified? And if so, tell us a little bit about the process. What tools did you use? How did you reach that final decision?
Yeah, I think, financially, you always have to back up what you're putting in place, right? I mean, you got to show that the ROI is there. Throughout the different projects that I've put in place, I've never actually used a tool that I've had to, put in place, a separate Excel spreadsheet and just kind of explaining what's going on with the financials piece. But, if it's whether you're putting in like, campus-wide Wi-Fi that you're going to charge residents for, you just got to, if you're buying it and you're paying $30, we got to make sure that we're going to get 45, for instance, make sure we're going to get at least $15 off of it. So I think that depends on the organization, what they want to see. There's certain percentages they want to see for each project that they put in place. But you also, it's not always about the financial return either. It's about the operational efficiency piece, right? So if you decide you want to roll these technologies out to all of your properties in your portfolio, you've got a large portfolio and you can reduce headcount, for instance. There's a huge financial piece to that. Or if you can manage those properties with less people, it's more beneficial. Or you can also set up, the regions where you can, if you've got, let's say, a bunch of properties in the Seattle area that you can manage with a group of maintenance technicians and even leasing agents, rather than just having people stationed at each property. And this technology allows you to do that, then you can get the ROI from there. So, I think it just depends on the organization and what they're looking for and what they're trying to do with it.
Those were two really the easiest scenarios where you're saying, okay, it's going to cost us this for this feature. We're going to be able to turn around and charge our resident X plus, whatever percent. Or we've been able to identify the operational efficiencies. Those seem like pretty easy solutions that are going to get approved and get the green light. But a lot of technology is not that simple. So how do you try to quantify some of the more intangible benefits that sometimes we have that gut, we know it's there, but maybe we haven't been keeping track of all those costs or the frequency of those type of events or what's going to happen within the organization to put it on paper and to create that Excel spreadsheet that Josh was talking about. I think everyone here has probably done one of those Excel spreadsheets.
I think Taylor's probably going to have some good points here when it comes to financial analysis, but one of the things that I'll bring up, I mentioned earlier that ADT's been in the multifamily business since the 80s. It was via acquisition. There was a company called Network Multifamily that was acquired by Protection One, and then Protection One merged with ADT. We still have customers with tradition. It wasn't smart home back in the 80s, right? It was traditional burglar alarms. The attrition rate, even for something as simple as a couple of door contacts and a keypad, is around 1%. So they bought it. They said, we're going to pay $10 a month. We're going to charge $11 a month. And they've kept it for 20 or 30 years in some of these cases because it's still generating revenue for them. They've gotten upgraded along the way. The product, worked on collectors back in the day or traditional phone lines, and we've gone to cellular now. As the technology changes, we call those customers. And even when we're reaching out saying, your technology's outdated, it's time to update it, your costs are going to increase a little bit, the attrition rate still remains below 2% because it's a revenue generating item for them where they say, we are paying less for it than we're charging for it, and our residents have come to expect it at this point. So whether it's something that they put into their marketing materials to say property A is different than property B across the street, for $10 more you're getting this experience, it becomes something that you can't back away from. So I talked earlier about 5% penetration for smart home in the market right now, and that's only going to keep going up because once it's implemented, it's something that just generates revenue. So I look at it very simply. I've never operated a property myself, but we're paying X dollars for it. We're making X dollars on it. It's not something that ends up going away. So that's just my 2 cents on it from the supplier side.
Yeah, I agree. I'll date myself here. Not that the gray hair in my beard didn't do that already, but who had the roll-up windows? Like anybody have the roll-up windows growing up, right? Then you go to power windows and you just never go back, right? Like it's just too easy, right? So we're definitely at power windows stage here. Even though I'd say overall we're in the third inning, right? We have our tech enthusiasts that started. We're in that early adoption phase, and we're kind of graduating to the big middle in terms of the adoption curve for this technology. I know Taylor's going to have quite a bit to add, but what I like to do is really roll up the sleeves and kind of get in there with our owner operators and say, okay, yeah, there's rent lift, which that's an interesting conversation. We've already entered into that territory now. Is that possible based on the economic environment? Which I like because that's the easy way out almost, right? Okay, you charge another 50, we're going to charge you 10 here, and you make the rest, right? That's still possible without a doubt, but it's more complicated. So rolling up the sleeves and saying, okay, you've got 10,000 units in the portfolio. Let's talk about vacant unit costs and what happens there. And if you were to save 17, 18% on vacant unit costs, let's look at that. So we're working now with our owner operators and saying, well, let's examine the intangible elements to this and help illustrate that ROI or help the operations team understand what kind of impact this can have. How many water events did you have last year? What did that cost you? Those are big numbers, right? Okay, if those go to zero, what does that do? So now you start to take those intangible elements, and it becomes like that 1 + 1 = 3 dynamic, where you really see the opportunities for smart home, throughout the community financially, and that's the resident experience and the efficiencies, those things are absolutely wonderful about this product. But the finish line is this, and this is what pushes this sort of deal over the edge and helps everyone win.
Now I want with my windows, I complain when it's one I have to actually hold it the whole time to roll the windows up, or I just want to do it once and have it do automatically. Okay, I'm going to turn the clicker over to Taylor because I know he's got a few things to share here about this topic.
Yeah, so we'll see which order. Okay, so talking about the actual financials and quantified capabilities of the technology. First, it's important where you're going to get that information from. And currently, owner-operators that are seeking this information, they really don't have many options other than deploying the technology across multiple vendors. Hopefully, they've invested a couple million in their business intelligence infrastructure so they can measure everything after deployment. However, it really is a very lengthy process to pilot different technologies and then to work backwards with the data company, i.e. your business intelligence department, to figure out how exactly did that technology impact your community. So that was actually, at Alliance, the largest opportunity that they provided me was they gave me access to all their resources and said, audit our property, or audit our portfolio. Once we determined smart home was valuable, we then deployed 4,000 units across many different vendors, actually 8 at the time, of which most of them are not even in business anymore. But point being is that we did the first really large use case of like, how does this technology impact our portfolio? Because at the time, no company had made any sort of large-scale deployment. And Jay Hemans, the president of Alliance, was very, he's a technologically focused person. He actually took me to CES to give you an idea. Like he's a nerd, right? Older dude, but super cool, super nerdy. And he was like, if you can show me in dollars and cents how this stuff is going to help me, he's like, you'll have my support. He's like, but you need to figure that out. So, for 9 months, it was the biggest undertaking I've ever taken in my career to try to get my arms around something like this that was so really variable. But what we did do is we determined that ultimately, if we were able to summarize simply based on different criteria, so I pulled a slide up here so you guys can kind of see like Point Central. So every provider in the space has different impacts of their technology. And you can see here Point Central, since they're on the panel here. These are some of the things that the Point Central technology specifically impacts at a community. But again, this is just an example, and every technology from SmartRent to, Vivint, even when they were deployed before they decided to get out of the space, every single provider has different benefits and different software components that impacts these different metrics. So ultimately what we wanted to do was take everything we learned from Alliance years ago. Once we determined kind of there's 16 different points at a community that this technology touches, and depending on which provider, that determines which point. So ultimately here with Point Central, this is actually one of my clients out of Austin, Texas, ResProp. This is a case study essentially that we did with them. So they leveraged the technology, our impact analysis reports, in place of running a pilot to try to understand the value themselves. And when they came to us, they had engaged 4 different smart home providers, and we're just trying to understand, which one should we choose. Ultimately, by leveraging our impact analysis reports, they felt confident enough with the data provided that they could skip forward to implementation and go ahead and recover that 9-month period that they would have lost revenue. They're going to go ahead and deploy it and make that revenue back. So you can see here that the 9 months we recovered them just at this one 278 unit community, they made an additional $92,000 in revenue after deployment because of that 9-month savings. And so Chris Green, you can see here, really excellent client, just really hammers home the need to minimize the investment in research and development, but also significantly increasing time savings and allowing them to quantify the hidden benefits. So I know I can get kind of down the rabbit hole, and I apologize for that, but you can definitely see here that owners are more than willing to make decisions and move forward with this technology, in my experience, if they know what exactly it is that the technology will impact. So with us having access to live market data, we're able to put in very specific metrics of one individual community, and we are able to provide that owner, leveraging that data, exactly what it is from a cash-on-cash return, if they're going to increase their rent, to if they don't increase rent at all, and they just look at how long is it going to take for the technology to pay for itself, just off the efficiencies. That's what the report that we provide to our clients actually shows. So I'll kind of pause there for a second and figure if you got any questions or anything I can kind of help clarify.
So when we look at kind of the broad range of technology that impacts multifamily, do you focus on particular areas or pretty much any technology across the whole space, or is it a focus?
Great question. So we started in the smart home IoT space primarily because that's my background. However, at this point, we're expanding into every prop tech niche within the market. So we're working with, like currently we have 22 verified vendors, and that ranges from like Google Fiber to LeaseLock to Snapped, which is fraud detection, to, like we really do work with everybody. And so it's our goal to really help owners, instead of having to invest all this time, energy, and effort, to instead say, how does this technology really help my community, and get them to that decision a little bit quicker.
Okay, so turning it over to either Marshall or Mike, can you talk about how having this tool, when your client's using this tool, how has it helped you as a vendor, and kind of where does Taylor's company fit into the sales process for you?
I think for us, it's because third party, right? So that's helpful. There are a lot of different data points that are out there on that we can provide on how to save on vacant unit costs, on how to mitigate risk for water, on how to have conversations in a retrofit about implementing technology and how to sort of phase that in terms of rent growth and renewals and all the impact that can have. At the end of the day, though, when it's a third-party tool, that's sort of like the mic drop, right? It just provides us the opportunity to say, hey, look, consult with a third party that's been there, that's done that actually has experience in the space, deploying thousands of smart home systems and spitting out a return that has entered all of the appropriate inputs, not just the basics. So for us, that's helped in the process, just because at the end of the day, I think I'm a trustworthy guy, but having a third party, it's not always what I say. It's leaning on somebody that's also done that has no incentive to plug Point Central or ADT or another provider. So that's been the value in leveraging Taylor's tool to date, and I think it's fabulous.
As a third party, I also believe Mike Branham is a trustworthy guy. So now everyone in the room believes you're a trustworthy guy because it didn't just come from you directly.
That's right.
Taylor had a quote up here, and it's back on the screen if we can show that. It was a Gartner quote. I don't know who caught it, but 8% of customers believe vendor-produced ROI studies and data. We're all looking for third-party validation because we can tell a great story, right? You can tell a great story about your communities, about your brand, about what you've created for your residents, but third-party reviews of properties, third-party suppliers that work with us to help get that across the finish line are extremely important. Taylor put a quote up there from Chris Green talking about getting the additional $90,000, skipping the test time period. Well, this was a joint. It's funny that this deal is what Taylor chose to go with because it actually touches Point Central and ADT as well. We were the integrator on it. Point Central was the software on it. So when ResProp made that decision, it made us the money faster too. So of course we love any kind of thing that moves the decision-making process faster for us, because it's not just additional revenue for our clients, it's faster revenue for us, it's faster decisions for us, and it helps when the data that Taylor provided is validated over that 9-month period, and they say, okay, the impact analysis report proved true. We are generating this extra revenue, we are saving this money on vacant utilities, we are saving this money in efficiencies at our property. It makes the decision to continue to implement smart technology at a faster pace much more commonplace. So it's, yes, third-party data is important. There's still validation internally at the companies who relied on that third-party data to make their decision. But once that's validated, it really opens the door for why wouldn't we continue to do this at multiple properties. So that's.
Well, let me read that quote from Chris Green, so maybe a little bit small for those in the back. The impact analysis reports provided by Innovative NOI has allowed us to minimize our investment in research and development while significantly increasing our time savings. The ability to quantify hidden costs, benefits, and right-size the investment is where we see significant value. So as we were talking about before, one of the ways to be able to validate is to have a referral come in. Taylor can help kind of fast track that by saying, hey, here are other clients we have that have real data experience and benchmark data as you're trying to make a decision for a new client, and pair them up with others who have good experiences with the particular vendors they might be exploring. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. We work with really all the providers. I mean, while yes, we have serviced a client, one of our clients, mutually, that's why I chose this, because I felt it was a good representation of like what we do with our clients. And
Didn't want to
also
start a fist fight
vendors.
here at the table. Yeah.
Didn't think putting another deal up there would have made sense. But really, I think it's very important that the owner just gets the confidence they need that they're making the right decision. Because I mean, when I got to Alliance, their biggest hesitation was we don't want to deploy a technology that's essentially going to be our headache later. And so it was like, that's why they felt the need to run these pilots and to get this data, because they were really concerned. Like, it's a scary thing. The report up there, it's not on the slide right this second, but you can see this specific project over the course of the full term cost the client about $500,000. So, I mean, if you're looking at spending $500,000 to make an improvement to your community.
That was the investment that was going to be required.
Yeah, so this is actually on this report, on the slide, you can see under the red column where it says project expense totals, you can see that on the CapEx, it was about $250,000, and the operational expense over the term of 72 months is roughly the same. So you're looking at about $500,000 over the course of 6 years. And if you're going to spend that $500,000, it's not that these owners can't afford it, and they're willing to spend it, but they want to also have confidence to make sure. And really the biggest benefit we've seen now is the owners have leaned in. ResProp at this point has deployed a couple thousand units, pretty quickly, and they really started with us about 2 years ago when we started getting this technology in the field, letting vendors help us test this technology, really providing market validation that our numbers were accurate. So we've, after deployment, gone back and found out that our numbers, while they're not 100%, they are within a 5% margin of error. And when you compare 5% margin of error to 9 months of additional revenue being that significant at one community alone, you multiply that across 10,000 units, and we're talking millions of dollars in additional money. So most owners, once they kind of see it this way, they're like, yeah, why haven't we done this yet? And that's essentially most of my client conversations.
Gotcha. Okay, so as we kind of look back
now,
on the quadrants of consideration, kind of open it up. Is there any questions in the audience that you'd like to ask any of the gentlemen here at the table? Unfortunately, I haven't pre-recorded any answers to your questions from Josh. Anything that's been on your mind as you've been listening that you feel like we haven't addressed or that you'd want to dig into a bit deeper?
There's so much innovation in prop tech. There's ways to improve your experience inside of a unit. There's ways to make a building operate better. What's the next frontier of prop tech? What's the next solution that every property is going to do? Yesterday we talked about leak detection was a big point of discussion yesterday. In previous conferences, it's about managed Wi-Fi, but I'd love to get everybody's take on the stage. What's next?
What's on the horizon?
That's a great question. I guess I'll jump in first here. So I think the biggest thing next is layer 2 on IoT. So what I mean by that is most of the technologies these two companies will be installing is the next generation of computer network, because IoT will be the foundation of everything that your property runs off of in the future. So having a strong foundation of IoT allows you to pursue things like self-touring and sharing economy type apps, like bringing services to the unit and getting revenue share and things like that. I think what we're going to see is owner-operators starting to really leverage the capabilities that IoT can provide to their community and ultimately increasing their revenue streams far beyond just rent. Because with the sharing economy model, they can be taking a cut of every single service that comes to that unit, as they should. So I think we're going to see a lot of push towards that and really try to maximize the monetization beyond just the square footage that you're leasing as an owner-operator.
And you'll hear managed Wi-Fi and that infrastructure is going to be a topic that will be touched on in, I think, all 3 remaining panel discussions we're going to have. It's still important.
I think some of that next generation touches probably what Connect is doing right now with short-term and hoteling style. I think the more technology that comes into multifamily, into build-to-rent, it's going to make, because all of us have the ability to work remotely now, jobs are not market-specific in a lot of cases. If you want to spend the first quarter of the year in Austin, Texas, and then you want to spend the next quarter in Nashville, and you want to spend the next quarter, find a property management company that has a property in each of those locations, utilize technology to make yourself, mobile, where you can work from wherever you want, maintain the same lease agreement. I think that as technology gets better and better, it's going to make moving around super simple. When we think about the hospitality industry right now, my hotel experience at Marriott's across the country is almost the same everywhere I go. They know a lot about me as a traveler. They know how many nights I've been there. They know what my preferences are when it comes to rooms. They've got welcome bags now whenever I get there with what I look for specifically. So when you translate that into living spaces, not just hotel spaces, I think that'll be kind of where we go next, and it's going to take technology to do that. So that's the direction that I see it going.
Some wonderful benefits from COVID came in the hoteling industry, and
yeah.
I use Marriott a lot too. It's just removing that friction from the customer experience, where now you don't even have to talk to someone at the desk. You check in from your phone becomes the key, you can walk right up to your room. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see what innovations come from the owner-operator side and how we as technology companies can accommodate that. I think we'll see more integrations, more data insights into utility consumption and what to do with that data to preserve or conserve on utilities. I think will be a big thing. I think of water. That's always been a challenge in multifamily. So I think we have the building blocks for again, smarter portfolios, not just smart units. And what we do with that will come down to data and how that data is sort of repurposed to run better buildings and provide better resident experiences.
And by the way, when you talk about data becoming so important, IoT being the backbone of everything, I do think that the positions inside multifamily are going to change. There will be less leasing agents, there will be less property managers, there will be a centralized maintenance group that can work within a certain portfolio of properties. But for those folks who are on the front lines today who are concerned, and I hear this from folks all the time, what's going to happen to the frontline jobs, lean into what's happening right now. Become the subject matter expert on the future of multifamily and become indispensable to your company, where your title will change, your role will change, you're not on site anymore. But if you're not leaning into this stuff, then you're going to get left behind. And so that's the one thing that I would add to all the data that's being collected right now. The decisions that come from it are going to include human capital and saying, we don't need this many people here anymore. And if you're not the person who's become indispensable to the organization, then you're going to be left looking for another job at that point.
So here's contact information for all the gentlemen we talked to today. Thanks. We can give a round of applause for our panel discussion here.